Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmaracharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Vishvaro Guratmeti Murti Veda Vibhagine Vyomabda Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sava Vedanta Svedanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sat Guru Pranatoshmaham Om Om Shanti 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 Om Namaste. Hello everyone. We are here to unfold the following verse on Panchadasi, on the evolution of matter, Panchadasi Prakriya. We have covered last week the verse 18. And the verse 18 says that by the will of awareness, consciousness in the form of Ishvara, and for the experience of the Prana Jiva, the five subtle elements arose from the part of Prakriti in which tamas predominates. So we have the five subtle elements, and from them we need to pull, a certain grossification of those energies. So where are we going to get those subtle elements? We have the five subtle elements, and every one of them is constituted by the three energies. And then, of course, when it comes to grossify, to create, we need to create not only with sattva, which is the intelligent cause, not only with rajas, the projecting power, but we need to create by the raw material called tamas. So out of the subtle aspect of the five, the tamasic subtle aspect of the five elements, awareness or consciousness, and for the experience of David, for the experience of all of us, the five elements, space, air, fire, water, and earth, arose from the part of this Prakriti in which tamas predominates. Prakriti is matter, is nature, is energy, is matter/energy. So we need to have this sort of transformation or conversion, from sattva into rajas and then into tamas, so that we can create these five subtle elements. Okay, so now we have the five subtle elements. It was brought into existence, okay? And it was brought into existence from the aspect of tamas, or in aspect of Prakriti, the aspect of Maya, in which tamas predominates in the subtle elements for the creation of the five elements, of course. So the next verse is the 19th. It says, from the Sattvic part of Prakriti's five subtle elements, okay? Now we're going to pull from the five subtle elements. Before, five subtle elements, they were pulled, they were taken from the tamasic aspect of Prakriti, okay? Now we have the five subtle elements. And then from the Sattvic aspect of the five subtle elements, arose in turn the five sense organs. So now we have the five subtle elements. They came out of the tamasic aspect of Prakriti, okay? Of the five elements of Prakriti, of the three energies of the tamasic. Let me see here. Now I got confused. By the will of awareness in the form of Ishvara and for the experience of Prana, the five subtle elements was created from the tamasic predominance of Maya, as we know. So the consciousness, once it shines on the tamasic aspect of Prakriti, it brings about the five elements. It brings this grossification of energy. And then once we have the five elements, and then creation is ready to move on. And then in the verse 19, Vidyaranya says, from the Sattvic aspects of each five elements arose. From the Prakriti, the five elements came, and then from each Sattvic aspect of these five elements, we know the five elements, they are constituted by the three energies, of course. Everything comes into existence with by the power of these three energies on different configurations. So it's saying here that this from the sattvic part of the five elements, the sattvic arose the sense organs. Now, why the sattvic part? Because the sense organs, they do not need much rajas and tamas. Of course, there is some rajas, there is some tamas in there, because the sense organs, they are the organs of knowledge, yeah? The vyana hindriyas, the aspect of our personality that does not do but receives and acknowledges, and understands and knows. So in order to create the five the five sense organs, we need to create it. I mean, Ishvara had to create it out of the five subtle elements, but it was pulling the sattvic aspect of each one of these subtle elements. Okay, why? Because for us to perceive the world, perceive the five elements, we don't need much matter, tamas, and we don't need much rajas, energy. Why? Because it's a very passive, reception. When we receive the impulse, the stimulus coming from the field, we don't need to do anything. We need to have our organs of reception, which is the most refined, which are the organs of knowledge, which needs to be as sattvic as it can be. Okay, of course, there is some tamas and some rajas involved as well, but it is from the sattvic aspect of the five elements that Ishvara brings out of these five elements and start developing what? The sense organs, okay? The organs of reception, the organs of knowledge, okay? Which is hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. Now, of course, all of that will have to be integrated by the mind, the subtle body as a whole, yeah? So that it can be received and known. Not only received, the sense perception, but known, acknowledged, understood, determined, and so on. So I want to go slow. Is it more or less clear so far? Yeah? Okay. Then the verse 20. From a combination of the sattvic portions of the five subtle elements. Now we have the we have these five subtle elements, that are going to give birth to the five sense organs of reception. Now, from the combination of the sattvic portion of the five subtle elements, so now it's not only a question of pulling each one of those elements and pulling the sattvic aspect to create the sense organs, because each one of these elements are going to give birth to one sense organ. You remember that, huh? So air is going to give birth to touch, and fire is going to give birth to the eyes, So each one of these elements is going to require a sense organ, and the sense organ develops out of the elements. So Ishvara begins creating the elements, and then simultaneously, let's say, he starts creating the organ, the sense organ, so that the creation can be complete. So we have matter here, and we have the sense organs to perceive this phenomenal object, So now, what we are going to see Ishvara doing? It's going to combine the sattvic portions of different elements. It's going to combine all 5 elements, but only the sattvic aspect of each one of these elements. And then what's going to make with all of that? Before he was pulling the sattvic aspect of one element to create a specific sense organ. No? Now he's going to combine, he's going to mix the sattvic aspects, portions of each one of these 5 elements. When he puts sattva, sattva, sattva of each one of these elements, and then he's going to create what? What we know to be the subtle body, okay? So, which is the organ of inner experience, okay? So from the combination of the sattvic portions of the 5 subtle elements, the organ of inner experience is created, arose. It's called the subtle body, Antahkarana. Okay, it's the subtle body with its complete function. Some of them are very receptive, with requiring less rajas and tamas. In the case of the yana, the intellectual, the intellect is very, very sattvic. Is the most sattvic, let's say, function of the subtle body. I mean, is our most sattvic aspect of our human experience. Is the intellect. Is very subtle. You know, it means to say there is less rajas, less tamas, because it's just about determining. You know, in the sense organs, the sense of reception requires as well a lot of sattva and less rajas and less tamas. But then there are some, the doer, for example, the ego requires a little bit more rajas and tamas because it has to act, it has to respond, it has, you know, and so in the same way, the mind, the feeler, the one who feels, requires more raja, the sense, the organs of actions, although belonging to the subtle body, they are going to require what more? They are going to require more rajas because it needs energy to go and offer a response to the stimulus coming from the field. The same thing with our prana systems. So all the physiological systems require a lot of rajas because it's energy, it's intelligent energy, just functioning and keeping the machinery well and alive. So let's go by. It's called the subtle body, Antahkarana. The Antahkarana functions in 2 ways. No? It doubts and it determines. So we are presenting the subtle body in 2 levels, like we do with the 5 sheets. Okay. So when we come into the subtle body, we have the mind kosha, the mental kosha, and then the intellectual kosha. You know? So the subtle body here is divided in 2 functions. The mental function, which is the one of course, integrating the stimulus coming from the field, from the field of experience, from the object. It receives the contact with the object, and sometimes an object involves two or three sense organs, which involves, you know, all the 5 elements, of course. So depending on the nature of each one object, we're going to have to receive the object by the eyes, by the ear, sometimes by the smell. So the mind is going to, first of all, is going to integrate these multiple stimuli or inputs, okay, in one single experience, so that we do not say, oh yes, I'm having an experience of seeing something, and now, oh yeah, but I had an experience of smelling something and touching something, but it's all apart. So now I have to do it myself. I have to make these 3 experiences one single experience, but that's not the case. So Ishvara does it in a way that the mind is going to receive the stimuli, integrating it all in one single experience. Okay, it makes sense. I think we all know that pretty much well. Now, so this is the mind, and the mind not only has this ability to integrate the different inputs, you know, the different signs, signals that come from the object. But the mind has the power to also to produce the energy. So we say the mind is one of the mental functions is to emote. Emote is to give energy. It feels, it integrates, it feels, it questions. It raises questions and immediately it emotes. It produces the energy to whom? To the ego. The ego is the intellect, let's say, in this model here. It's going not only to feel and to question and to present that contact to the intellect, but for that it needs to bring it with a certain energy. It emotes the intellect, which is the ego, not only to determine, but to act, to respond. Just imagine if you would have a court system that makes decisions but does not impose those decisions. I mean, the same thing is, just imagine if our intellect would go about determining, discriminating, and deciding, but never acting upon those decisions. So we have a problem. Why? Because the mind did not provide the energy necessary. Therefore, we say that the mind emotes. And besides that, it questions and doubts, because that is the nature of the mind, is to contact an object, to feel the object. Every object slash thought has a field to itself. The mind feels, and then it has, and as we know, life is about stimuli and response. So every time we get a stimulus coming from the field, it requires a response. So we need to respond. So, and then it needs to present the question to the intellect and say, hey, so what is the best possible course of action here? What is the best response? You know, and waits for the intellect to decide. Once the intellect makes up its mind, and then it requires the emotion which is provided by the mind, so that it can go and be the doer of that response. Okay, so the mind has these functions in two ways. It doubts and it determines. It integrates, as I said. It emotes and it determines. This is the Antahkarana that many times is present as the subtle body and sometimes is present generally as the mind. Okay, so in our models, once we start moving into analyzing the subtle body into more details, we no longer call it mind, we call it the subtle body. And then we split it, we divide it in different functions, and we can divide in many functions as we wish, including the memory center, memory function, because a lot of the times, I mean, most of the times, the intellect requires to go into the files in which all the memories of past experience was similar to the one being present to itself at the moment. And then we need to pull that data from the memory system. So there are a lot of things going on in the subtle body, okay? But here it was presented in the most simple way, presenting this subtle body divided in two functions, one the doubting function and the other is the determining function. In its doubting function, this subtle body is called mana maya kosha, yeah? The one who feels and questions, and presents the situation, the dilemma to the intellect. So it functions is called mind. In doubting function, it's called mind, mana. And its determining, discriminating function, the side function, is called the intellect. Okay, so we have two koshas here operating the subtle body, the manomaya kosha and the yanamaya kosha, the determining, deciding factor function, and the feeling and questioning function, among other functions for the mind. Okay, so do we have any doubts about the way this subtle body? We probably heard from Ramji and some other teachers in our sampradaya that the subtle body is constituted using a lot of sattva. Yeah? We know that everything it comes from the three energies, the three qualities, the three energies the building blocks of creation. So it's from that the whole universe, including all the jivas and the human jivas, are constituted. But when the jiva having three bodies, we know that the subtle body, being extremely subtle, it can only require a lot of sattva. Sattva is the knowledge, energy, the energy responsible for knowledge, for knowingness, for clarity, in all these intellectual knowing faculties. So it's, of course, this subtle body, it's highly sattvic in its constitution. And in fact, the problem of the human jiva is that has a subtle body, and the subtle body is so sattvic that he becomes a great reflector. It reflects consciousness to produce the human sentience. This sentience, this human sentience, is consciousness reflecting this subtle body, because the subtle body is constituted, is is conditioned by a lot of sattva. It is, how you say, it's, I'm looking for the word here. Anyhow, it's the proportion of sattva is dominant. It's dominated by a lot of sattva. Okay, so we have the subtle body being dominated by a lot of sattva, and then when we start analyzing the different functions of the subtle body, as we will see in the next verse, we'll see that different functions will require a different proportion or configuration, yeah, of these three energies. But generally speaking, there is a lot of sattva there, just a little bit of rajas and a little bit of tamas. As we go down, in our subtle body, when we go into the feeling aspect, the mental, the manas aspect, and when we go into the organs of actions, when we go into the prana maya kosha, the physiology, there we are still in the subtle body. There is a lot of sattva there because it's invisible matter. It's very subtle matter. But yet there are more rajas, because the subtle body, when it comes to the physiological functions, the pranas, when it comes to the ability to respond, the organs of actions which belongs to the subtle body, when it comes to produce the energy for the intellect to respond, to determine, all of that, those are aspects of the subtle body that requires a little bit more rajas as well, especially the pranamaya kosha. Pranamaya kosha is pure, intelligent, vital air, designed with the intelligence to keep the body functioning properly. So we will see it all as we go here. So how is it going for you guys? How are you doing, Karen?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
Okay, yeah.
Good. Have a coffee if you begin falling asleep.
Well, I'm eating my lunch. I have to eat right now.
Okay. So the verse 21, from the rajas portions of the five elements arose in turn the organs of action, which is speech, hands, feet, anus, and sex. So we know the five organs of actions, and we need energy to move those organs into action, as we know. Nah? So we're gonna speak, we're gonna expel certain materials, we're gonna touch things, we're gonna run, we're gonna have sex for the sake of procreation or fun or whatever, But those are action organs that needs to act. Okay, so it requires more rajas, and then it's from the rajas portions of these five elements. The five elements, they are subtle, okay? Five subtle elements. And then from the rajas aspects of the five subtle elements, Ishvara brings about the organs of action. Before we saw that from the subtle, sattva aspect of the five subtle elements, Ishvara brought about the organs of knowledge, the organs of reception, okay? Why? Because when we receive, we don't need to do anything. We are just receiving. Understand? But when we need to respond, and then we need to do something, and then more rajas is required. So now we are just about presenting a response, and then Ishvara pulls the from the subtle five subtle element, the rajas aspect, to and then arise in turn the organs of action, speech, hands, feet, anus, and sex. Okay. If you guys have any consideration, any question, or anything that is now makes sense, so please stop me. Huh? The verse 22nd. Prana, also known as the vital air, arose from the rajas portion of the five elements. Anybody saying something there? Okay. So the pranas, the five physiological systems, the vital air arose from the rajas portions of the five subtle elements. So we have the five subtle elements. By the way, the five subtle elements are referred as the Tanmatras. Tanmatras are the five subtle elements before they start to grossify, before they start dividing in half, and then holding one half of itself and then offering the other 50% to the other four energies, four elements, and then there will be two, 1/8, 1/8, and weight, and one half. Okay, 1/8, 1/8 weight makes one half, and then the other half, for example, air, space. There is space, and then space. Once it becomes air, it holds 50% of itself, and then it allows the other 50% goes mixed with the other elements, and like that it's going to, but the Tanmatras are the elements in its subtle state without any mixing up, except when it says here, for the formation of the subtle body, it just pulls the Sattvic aspect of these subtle elements to make the subtle body, as it says here. Combination of the Sattvic portion of the five elements, they start the five elements, only the Sattvic things of the five elements, it's another configuration, okay, to create the subtle body. We were talking about the Tanmatras, and then later on it grossifies, into matter, and that is no longer called Tanmatra, but is the five dense elements, which are no longer pure, okay? They are not the Tanmatras, the pure elements, as we will see as we go here. From the rajas portions of the five elements arose the organs of actions. Prana, the vital air, arose from the rajas portions of the five elements, the Tanmatras. It divided into five physiological functions. So this is just so beautiful. So we have this situation now. So the subtle body also is the body by which Ishvara keeps the machinery, lubricated, let's say, running, energized, operative, and so on. So we have this situation, and for that we have this vital air that comes, and then it divides itself, this vital air, to create, pulling the rajas portions of each one of these elements, and then pulls this, rajas aspect of each one of these elements, and then produce the five physiological systems. Okay, the five functions called respiration, excretion, assimilation, circulation, and the power to eject unwanted objects. Okay, so this, how does Ishvara create that? It just takes the raja portion of the five subtle elements, and then out of that, it divides this raja portion that she pulled together from the five elements, and then creates these five physiological functions. Okay, one for the respiratory system, another is for the circulation system, The other is for assimilation system, digestion system, better said, digestion, circulation, excretion, and respiration, and the energy, the prana that eject unwanted objects. We know that very well. Every time we have an infection in our body, or if we hurt ourselves and there is another skin kind of infection, immediately whatsoever is there, oh, there is a thorn inside there, something. And then when you see nature start creating a condition to expel that, if we eat something that does not feel right, and then the body says, no, this is unwanted, so let's expel it. I have a friend of mine who has done a transplant there in Olympia, Washington, a transplant of kidney, and she's doing very, very well, but she's still having to be extremely careful because she's taking a lot of drugs to suppress her immune system. Why? Because this immune system, which is nothing but this prana system, the physiological systems, the immune system is part of this system, it wants to do what? Wants to expel the the kidney. You understand? Why? Because it did not recognize it to be a natural part of the body. So now she's suppressing this system so that that kidney is not rejected, and then after some time it seems that the system is going to accept this new foreign object, and they say, okay, now we're going to adopt you as part of the family, and then okay, so, and then she's going to decreasing the medication, and then the system is going to live well with this new kidney. So these are different aspects of the five physiological system, and this power to eject unwanted objects is also the same power Ishvara used, not only to expel things that are not okay to our physiological body, but also whenever it needs to remove or to expel or to pull the subtle body from the physical body. Scripture says that it is the same energy, this energy that ejects unwanted objects, udana. It's also the same energy that removes the subtle body from the physical body. It's very interesting, because we need energy to throw out something from the physical body. We never thought about that, but just imagine that comes a point that Ishvara is going to say, okay, now you don't want to throw out any chemicals or anything or any intrusion in your physical body. You have to throw out the very subtle body, you understand? So the subtle body, as we know, it pervades the physical body and enlivening the physical body. But it comes a point that the body is weak. The body is no longer fit to hold the subtle body. But there is attachment. And then Ishvara almost invariably, it puts the Jiva into coma and then utilize the same energy to eject not the little things here and there, but eject the subtle body and say, okay, just go, have a good trip, fly high, take a break, and you're gonna come back again. So this is the beauty of this creation. No? Don't you find it amazing? Huh, Claudio? Don't you find it incredible? Hmm? Hmm? The verse 23rd. The five sensory organs, the five organs of action. Now we're going to look at the subtle body as a integrated system. Okay, one single organism. The five sensory organs, the organs of reception, okay? The five organs of response, the five organs of actions, the five physiological functions, the five vital airs, plus mind, intellect, and ego together form what is called the subtle body in the science of reality presented by the Upanishads. Okay, so the five sensory organs, the receptive organs, the organs of response, the action organs, the five vital airs, plus the mind, intellect, and the ego, these 18 aspects of the subtle body, 18 functions in the first subtle body, altogether forms or makes up what is known as the subtle body. Okay, and this subtle body, again, it's important to understand that the jiva is not the subtle body. I mean, on a preliminary stage, we present the subtle body as the jiva, but the subtle body is that sort of system, made out of subtle matter, okay, intelligently designed, that is vivified by by the pranas and consciousness. Of course, everything that is alive due to Maya, consciousness, Maya, and everything that unfolds. No? So this subtle body yet is just inert, subtle matter, and therefore is not the jiva. The jiva is the reflection of consciousness. So we have to remember, Chidabhasa, the jiva is the reflected chit, reflect consciousness, okay, reflect existence. So it reflects in the consciousness, and then we become consciousness itself. Oh, it's a reflection, but our nature is the same. It's consciousness and nothing other than consciousness, okay? Because we are conscious beings and we exist as conscious beings. So we are not the subtle body, and I like to also all the time remind ourselves about that. Okay? Because you see, the subtle body, as we know, is the reflector. And the jiva appears shining that reflector or reflecting that reflector. So how can we separate the jiva from the reflecting medium? You understand? So I mean, we can never separate a reflection in a mirror. You look at yourself in the morning. There you see the mirror and you see your reflection. You can never really separate the reflection in the mirror from the mirror. You understand? So they are very intimately related, but they are not the same, because the mirror is just glass with something on the back, and my image is something else. And my image in the mirror is so similar to my real face. If I could have eyes to look back at myself. Understand? So, but somebody, I can go next to Mark and say, Mark, look into the mirror. And then Mark looks into the mirror, and then I am the witnessing, and then I say, yes, Mark, I'm looking at your face, and I'm looking at the face reflect. It is absolutely the same. Okay? It's absolutely the same. It's the same. So one is reflect and one is original. So we can never really separate Jiva from its subtle body, because it requires the subtle body for its existence as consciousness. You understand? But we know that the Jiva, being itself consciousness in its nature, the Jiva transcends the reflecting medium, because it determines or claims its identity as original consciousness, because we know that the original, after the reflection and before the reflection, in any case, it's basically consciousness and consciousness alone. Okay, so the reflection is by nature is the same thing as the original light of consciousness, in the same way in the analogy of the reflection of sunlight on a reflecting medium. Okay, so the jiva is not that, but at the same time, it's not really totally dissociate of this subtle body. That's why we need to take care of this have this body. Body is matter. Body is inert matter. We need to take care of this body, the physical body and the subtle body, because Jiva, the mental condition of the Jiva, the physical condition of the Jiva, even, depends on a health subtle body. Okay? So if your subtle body, if we neglect the subtle body is that by which, I become a functional individual with all those different functions as we are looking here in this book. If I neglect my subtle body, and then so how it's going to be the reflection? Just imagine, oh, I have my mirror here, but I keep scratching it, and I just fry chicken next to it, and then a lot of oil, sits on it, and then more dust. And then, I mean, if I'm treating my reflecting medium in that way, so this reflection, the reflection later on, is going to be compromised. So, and the reflecting medium is important. Why? Because it's reflecting consciousness. Consciousness. We want the reflecting medium to be clear so that I can enjoy my consciousness, my knowingness, my sentience, my intelligence. Right? So we are not the mirror, but we want to take care of our mirror. The same way we are not the physical body, but we want to take care of the physical body because it's the temple by which we can live, enjoy, and grow, and transcend or be free. Okay, where we are. The verse 23rd. The five sensory organs. The five sensory organs, the five organs of action, the five vital areas, mind, intellect, and ego together form the subtle body. The subtle body cannot be perceived by the sense organs. Of course cannot. So the subtle body is subtle matter, and then the sense organs, it's perceiving what? It's perceiving the world, okay? But if we look into our chart, the sense organs, they are there in between the physical body and the subtle body. So it's on the lower aspect of the subtle body. So who is the perceiver in the subtle body? The perceiver in the subtle body is the intellectual function because it's the subtler. The subtler can perceive the denser, but the denser cannot perceive the subtler. Okay, so this denser aspect of the subtle body, which is the sense organs, and the physiological function, these are this inert matter that they are not really sentient. The only sentient aspect of the subtle body is what? Is the reflection on the intellectual kosha. It's there that consciousness shines with what? With sentience, the ability to know and to determine. Okay, I know and I know that I know, and and I'm trying to understand what life is all about, and so on. So, and then it says, therefore, it says that the subtle body cannot be perceived by the sense organs. Of course, the subtle body is a whole, overall, can only be perceived by the intellect. The intellect can perceive, but perceive in a cognitive way. We cannot perceive many things in life. I mean, we can feel love, but we don't perceive love in the sense that we can touch, feel, we can touch and smell, and so on. But we can see, ooh, I'm experiencing great love here, So intellectually, the intellect, it can perceive that there are pranas operating here, can perceive, although it's an invisible phenomenon, or I'm perceiving my pranas, I'm perceiving my feelings, my emotions, I'm perceiving my manas operating here, I'm perceiving my ego, it's a very subtle perception, and all of that is possible only due to this sentience, which is sitting there at the top of our subtle body, didactically speaking, as the intellect, the very ability we have. If there is anything that is self-conscious, is the intellect. That's why self-knowledge is only possible in the intellect. You understand? Because it's there where we can really know our own experience of life and perceive it, feel. Of course, we need the entire machinery. We need the sense organs and everything, but it's there, this cognitive, function that can say, okay, I am, and I know that I am. And I know, I experience, and I know that it all happens on the very subtle aspect of our subtle body, which is the intellect sheet. The subtle body cannot be perceived by the sense organs. It's known as the linga shahira, that by which something is known. So the sense organs, they cannot perceive. Sense organs is inert matter and cannot perceive anything. It's not self-conscious, not conscious of the intellect, okay? But these sense organs is known as the linga shahira, that by which something is known, because the intellect knows what it knows, but it knows, via the sense organs, okay? So he needs the sense organs that sits in the subtle body, which is different from the instruments of knowledge, instruments of perception. We have the instrument, the physical material instruments of knowledge, of reception, of actions, and for perception. So we have those, ears and nose and legs and the physical aspect. But all of these instruments, they have a subtle body, a subtle function. Its functions are really being operated in the subtle body. And these are not sentient. They are not sentient principles, meaning to say the sense organs cannot be aware of the intellect. You understand? The intellect is aware of the sense organ. But it's said to be linga shahira, that by which something is known, because the intellect cannot know anything without the organs of knowledge. If the organs of knowledge are not there, the intellect will never know. So it's not sentient, it's known as that by which knowledge is possible. It's only possible if the entire machinery, the equipment is well, integrate and connect, so the intellect will know what it knows, and it depends on all these different functions, the manas and the sense organs and the pranas, everything is required for the intellect to know. Linga means a sign. Linga shahira, that by which something is known. Linga means a sign, and shahira means something that is perishable, to make a point that it is inert matter subject to time. It comes and goes, it dies. It's matter. Matter come and go. Perishable. It's made of sattva and reflects awareness. So these linga shavira, which are the sense organs, is that by which something is known, okay? It is something that signals, or something that is perishable, but allows the intellect, allows knowledge to happen. It's made out of sattva, predominantly, and of course, consciousness, okay? So this reflects awareness, okay? So the subtle body cannot be perceived by the sense. Okay, I'm misreading here. So the first part I read correctly, but it's the subtle body. It's known as the linga shahira, that by which something is known. The subtle body is an overall thing. is the body by which we can gain knowledge, okay? It's that by which something is known. It means linga shahira, okay? Which is linga means sign and shahira means something that is perishable. This subtle body is made out of sattva and it reflects awareness as we know, okay? Hence, it is a sign, it is an indicator. That's the importance of this subtle body, that's of this reflector, because it reflects consciousness. And then we need to analyze the reflecting medium to understand, that that it's signaling, it's giving us an indication or advertisement, like Nisargadatta Maharaj used to say, advertising us, that there is a principle called consciousness, that is reflecting here, and then it is revealing the world for the Jiva. Nah? So this subtle body is reflecting consciousness, and it is an indicator, it's a sign, okay? It cannot be seen directly, but it is a sign of the presence of consciousness. And this subtle body, this reflecting medium, is subject to change. So that is also something that needs to be taken in account. So the subtle body and the jiva in its reflection, pure reflection of consciousness, of reflection. A reflection depends always on the quality of the reflecting medium. So the jiva, as long as he's identifying with the reflection, his reflection is going to be different from moment to moment, because the reflecting medium is going to change according to the proportion, the modifications of the gunas and the subtle 5 elements. So all this changing on the guna level is going to keep producing change in this medium, reflecting medium, to produce what? To produce different states of human consciousness or different mental states. So this is to, again, to make a point that this subtle body, it reflects consciousness. This subtle body, as it says here, is subject to constant change. Why? Because the gunas modify it from moment to moment. So the reflecting medium is not the jiva, right? Because it's matter, okay? It's perishable, and and it's all the time subject to different inclusions, proportions of the energies, and the reflection as well, since it is a byproduct of the quality of the mirror, is also a changing phenomenon. It's in a flux of constant change. So the jiva, as a reflection, can never say, I, jiva, I am consciousness. If the jiva feels that, oh, I am changing, okay, and then he did not understand that he is consciousness. You understand? Because the reflection changed, but the original consciousness does not change. The reflection of consciousness on the reflecting medium is, depending on the quality of the medium, is going to produce a different reflection. This reflection is going to be different from moment to moment. Therefore, if your jiva says, oh, I am the reflection of consciousness and I change, and then the jiva did not understood that he is original consciousness, that which is not subject to modification, okay? It is nirvikara, it is akarta and nirvikara. Nirvikara does not modify in any possible way with experience, okay? So the jiva has to understand, I'm not the subtle body, the reflecting medium. I'm not the reflection that is subject to variations of the reflecting medium. What I am is what? I am the essence, okay? I am the essential nature of this reflection. I am original consciousness. I am consciousness. And this consciousness does not modify, although the reflection modifies and I experience in the world through the reflection. The reflection is modifying. And I'm experiencing the world through this reflection. Only by the means of knowledge and understand, I can establish my identity as original consciousness. You understand? Because the reflecting consciousness are going to be changing. And then we say, oh my God, so, how I'm going to define myself. You understand? So you need to understand that. Okay, although my mental state is in continuous flux of change, I am that which does not change. I am the conscious awareness that is shining on this intellect that is changing in accordance with its constitution, but I remain free of any change. Okay? So this is what self-knowledge is. I'm not the subtle body. I'm not the reflection. I am original consciousness, that which never changes. Hence, this subtle body is a sign or indicator of the presence of changeless awareness. This subtle body changes as the gunas modify it, whereas awareness remains changeless, as we know. Okay? You understand, Mark? You got that already, huh? Long ago, huh?
Yeah, beautifully explained, Arlindo. Thank you.
Yeah, it's all a question of identity or identification. We need to decide. I mean, we need to decide, and what kind of identity I want to assume. I want to be identified with that which changes or with that which does not change. You understand? And once that decision is made, and that decision is based on a lot of clear understanding of these teachings, and then we are good to go. And does not matter the quality of the reflection, does not matter the quality of the reflecting medium. I already established my identity with that which is OC, original consciousness, which is not subject to change. I have seen it, I have got it, I have understood it. The mind changed, the intellect changed, the ego changed, the pranas change, the physical body change, everything's changed, everything is going south, as Ramji says, but there is something that is there, never going south, never going north, it's just this limitless conscious existence that does not move. Anything else from anybody? Okay. Macrocosm and microcosm. Samasti and Vyasti. When prana, the Jiva, identifies with an individual subtle body, it's called Taijasa, the shining one. So the Jiva, when the individual soul, let's say, when prana, the Jiva, this Jiva, when the scriptures present the Jiva or the creation as something that arose for the sake of the prana Jiva, is the Jiva in its macrocosmic causal body, and it's often also present as the eternal Jiva as well. It is a principle. There are three principles in this creation. So these three principles, as we know, is the creator, Ishvara, Jagat, the world, and then the agent, the Jiva. So this Jiva is eternal. It's a principle. It exists in potential in the macrocosm. So when the universe is created, we have the prana, the eternal Jiva, sitting there potentially, out of this overall Jiva, overall soul, and then many souls are going to arise as well. So when this Jiva identifies with this Jiva, the eternal Jiva, the universal Jiva, okay, the macrocosmic Jiva, when this macrocosmic Jiva identifies with an individual soul, an individual subtle body, let's say, okay, when he just, it's like surfing, it takes one of these, individual souls and says, okay, I'm going to identify with this individual soul. When it identifies with individual soul, with individual subtle body, and then immediately it already goes into the manifestation to become Taijasa, the one shining, with consciousness. It shines with consciousness. It's a subtle body, okay? The same way the subtle body shines in the night when we move into a dream state. It shines, consciousness shines, and then whatsoever content of our vasanas is there is going to project the dream world, the dream objects, and so on. So the shine one, Taijasa, the dreamer, okay? So that is when this universal soul, this universal eternal Jiva, gets identified with an individual soul, and then he says, okay, this is my subtle body now. I'm going to trip with this one, and then immediately it grows fast to be called Taijasa, the one shining with consciousness, and it becomes the dreamer. When Ishvara identifies with all subtle bodies, it's known as Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg. So we are seeing the concept of the macro and the micro. The Jiva is just the eternal Jiva identified with a specific individual, subtle body or soul, and then immediately it becomes in the subtle realm, in the subtle, the subtle realm. It becomes what? It becomes Taijasa, the shine, the one shine with consciousness, okay? Or the dreamer, okay? This on the subtle level of the universe. Before we are looking into the macrocosm, and now we are looking into the dreaming being manifest, the eternal Jiva become the individual Jiva, appearing as the Taijasa. And then it says when Ishvara identifies with all the subtle bodies, so we have the Jiva becoming one individual subtle body, okay, as it identifies with individual soul. And then we say here that Ishvara, when Ishvara identifies with all subtle bodies, okay, and then it's known as Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg. So the point here to be understood is that Ishvara, although many times it is presented as the sum of all jivas, all subtle bodies, you understand? We need to understand that that is only one aspect of Ishvara. It's not all aspect of Ishvara, okay? Just look at this logic. If Ishvara would be just the summatory, the sum of all subtle bodies, so Ishvara would be subject to what? To a lot of avidya, because the subtle body of the jivas is what produces jivas, avidya, because the subtle body is a mirror, reflecting mediums that, due to the excess of rajas and tamas, produce ignorance. So Ishvara would no longer be pure knowledge, you understand? So Ishvara is everything manifest, but we cannot say that Ishvara is the totality of all subtle bodies, because that would mean to say that Ishvara is the totality of all avidya, you understand? But it's not. So Ishvara is pure knowledge, it's pure sattva, okay? But then in the process of bringing about Jagata and Jiva, it depends on this army of subtle bodies producing individual jivas, so that the jivas can process their karma and keep presenting to Ishvara all individual vasanas. And then Ishvara uses the totality of these vasanas, to keep reshaping the universe, okay? Because the universe has to be custom designed to the macrocosm body of vasanas of all jivas. And then we can say that Ishvara, if Ishvara would identify, to begin with, Ishvara does not really identify, because Ishvara is not an entity, okay? So it does not. It's just, these are all concessions, due to the limitation on language. But suppose Ishvara apparently identifies with all subtle bodies, and then it's known as Hiranyagarbha, the golden egg. So let's go a little bit into the commentaries here. If both are born out of the subtle body, what is the difference? So again, Ishvara is not born out of the subtle body. We are talking about Jiva and Ishvara here. That Jiva is consciousness identified with one subtle body, one individual subtle body. And Ishvara would be identification with all subtle bodies. And then in that sense, Ishvara depends on the subtle bodies, which is not really the case. You understand? If both are born of the subtle body, what is the difference? Ishvara is consciousness identified with everything, and pure original consciousness identifies with nothing. So we have here two concepts. One is Brahman, or Ishvara one. Okay, we have Brahman, or pure limitless consciousness, which does not identify with anything. And then we have Ishvara. Ishvara fundamentally is pure knowledge, okay? And in the process of knowing everything, it plays with rajas and tamas to create Jiva and Jagat. And then it knows how to control Jiva and Jagat to precision, you understand? And then we may say that Ishvara, is the totality. But Ishvara is not limited by the sum of all subtle bodies. It's not limited by the sum of all subtle bodies plus Jagat, the inert world. Ishvara is fundamentally pure knowledge, and it just plays with the energy to create this ground of experience for the jivas to process their karma. He created the jiva, he created the stage for the jivas, he controls both, okay? Therefore, if both are born out of the subtle body, I have to tell you one thing. I need to take my time, and I promise I will do it. I want to listen very carefully to the exposition of Swami Paramarthananda on this passage. Sometimes it's very, very time consuming because he's very slow. Just to give an idea, I'm doing the chapter 7 of the same book with the people in Brazil. The one chapter, the chapter 7, we have the transcriptions of Swami Paramarthananda on the teachings, audios on the chapter 7, 1,300 and something pages, only one chapter. You know what I'm saying? Why? Because he goes really into detail. I want to look at his commentaries because I want to understand better this exposition here, why it's said here, and it could have been Swami P, could have been an edition of Ramji. Ramji has compiled this book based on the audios or the thoughts of Swami Paramarthananda. So it says, if both are born of the subtle body, no, Ishvara was not born out of the subtle body of all jivas. Ishvara was born out of the reflecting medium called Maya. Jiva was born out of the reflection of consciousness on the individual subtle body. They are two different reflecting mediums. The macrocosm reflector is Maya, okay? And the microcosm reflection is the individual soul subtle body, okay? So I want to understand better this passage here. If both were born of the subtle body, which is not really the case, what's the difference? Ishvara was born out of the macrocosmic medium, which is not a subtle body, it is just Maya or Prakriti. So, and then Ishvara is born out of the Sattvic aspect of Maya, right, Dave? Are you following, Dave? Huh? I see that you're not.
Well, I'm conflicted because you're saying you're using the word born with Ishwara.
Huh?
You're using the word born with Ishwara,
Yeah.
which born means there's a beginning.
Yeah, I know.
And so, in Ishwara, there's no beginning. I don't
Yeah,
understand.
you have to be very careful with language. Language is very poor and limited to. That's why I'm going slowly and I'm trying to present the flaws involved in this language, in this composition here. We know Ishvara was never born. You understand? And
Well,
we know, and much less out of Jiva Sattva bodies. Ishvara, if Ishvara was born, it comes into existence, every time that is said to be the waking state of Brahman, Maya come in operation, and then Ishvara is born, but it's born, not born as a beginning of time. It's just, it awakens again. Okay, the universe, when it awakes first with Ishvara, because it's the knowledge, the pure knowledge of the entire universe, of all times, of all universe, that again comes into manifestation according to the scriptures. Okay, so Ishvara is eternal, it's beginningless, but it goes back into the macrocosm seed potential form, okay, called Maya in the macrocosmic level, the night of Brahman, and then it's Maya awakens again, or Maya comes into operation, and again the reflection of consciousness shines in this macrocosm mirror, the macrocosm reflecting medium called Prakriti, and then comes Ishvara, and then comes Jiva, and then comes Jagat. And so it lives eternally. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Ishvara was not born out of the subtle body. Ishvara, if we use, Ishvara emerges from time to time. Every time the universe emerges, Ishvara comes, reflect on Maya, not reflect on all small Jivas, subtle bodies, you understand? So Ishvara is going to be born out of the reflection of consciousness on Sattva, on the Sattva aspect of Prakriti. And the Jiva is going to be born out of reflection of consciousness on this individual Sattva body. Huh? You remember the universal Jiva is saying, I'm going to take a ride here, I'm going to identify with this individual soul, and I'm going to look for, for grossification, and I am identified with this subtle body. You understand? So the Jiva needs a medium. The medium is a subtle body that later on hooks up with the physical body to create a real, effective, experiencing entity. That in order to experiencing the Dharma field, we need the three bodies associated with one another. It's not enough to have the seed, the causal, and then the sato. The causal calls the sato, and then the sato calls the physical. And then we have a proper jiva as an experienced entity. So the jiva is born out of sato body because it's a reflection of consciousness in the subtle body. So Ishvara, in that case, is consciousness, is identified with everything. Again, Ishvara does not really identify because Ishvara is not an entity that identifies with matter. Ishvara is pure knowledge. Pure original consciousness identifies with nothing. That's clear. So consciousness, there is no question of identification for consciousness. It's free. It's one without a second. It's limitless. It's non-dual. Ishvara comes into play. It's not a jiva. It's not a super jiva. When Manjit says it's not a super jiva, it's not the sum of all jivas to say, oh, I'm Ishvara, and I depend on all my jivas. No, Ishvara produced the jivas. Ishvara can get rid of all jivas at any time. You understand? Because it's the pure sattva, the pure knowledge, and it can recreate everything again and again. But there is a law there that makes Ishvara connect to the jivas, because the jivas have to produce actions to become vasana so that Ishvara can keep, reshaping the universe. I don't know if you guys understood this picture yet. But Ishvara, you know, also depends on the Jiva. What happened to Claudio? He fell. Pure original consciousness identifies with nothing. Consciousness identified with a particular subtle body is a Jiva. Okay, this is another statement. We see it again and again. Consciousness identified with a subtle body becomes a Jiva. Now, consciousness, the proper way would be consciousness identified with Sattva becomes Ishvara. You understand? Because consciousness is going to shine in Sattva to produce that. Quote unquote, quote unquote, quote unquote. Ishvara, consciousness will quote unquote shine in Sattva to produce quote unquote Ishvara. Understand? So that we can say, okay? Pure original consciousness identifies with nothing. When it identifies with Sattva, so to speak, because consciousness does not get identified. Consciousness never get really ignorant, because many times we say, oh, consciousness becomes the Jiva and experiencing a video. No, consciousness apparently identifies with a Jiva because it shines in the Jiva to produce Jiva Atma, the consciousness reflect. And as consciousness reflects, it becomes the Jiva Atma, and the Jiva Atma feels to be limited and bound. But consciousness does not feel any of that because it's beyond experience. Consciousness does not associate with anything. The scriptures say again and again, it's associationless. But the language, to make it easier for us to understand, is say, okay, consciousness plus Maya, yeah, plus Sattva, and then we have Ishvara plus Ishvara, plus Jagata, plus Jiva, and then we have a complete universe. But it's not that consciousness associates and make partnership with any other factor, because all of this is a mere appearance. It's just a projection. It's a mirage. It is not really real. You understand? Consciousness, and we can know it from our own experience, consciousness is not doing anything. The mind is trying to understand Vedanta. The mind is trying to understand the nature of reality, the nature of the I. But consciousness does not do anything because it's beyond knowledge and ignorance. It's beyond experience. It's this conscious, is subject conscious, non-experience, principle, existence conscious principle that is beyond the whole shebang of Mithya. You understand? It's totally. Mithya is totally different order. It's an apparent order. Consciousness identified with a subtle body as if it's a Jiva. We can say, okay, it's a concession to ignorance. So does consciousness identify with the Jiva? No, Maya makes it appear so. Why? Because Maya creates these configurations of three bodies in which consciousness shines. But then consciousness there is not really clear. The only clear reflection of consciousness is called Ishvara because it's reflecting on pure Sattva, the Sattvic aspect of Prakriti. And then when it reflects on the subtle body, consciousness is suffering from avidya, the inability to understand things as they are, much less the true nature of reality. You understand? But consciousness does not really identify with anything. But we say sometimes things like that. Taijasa, the Jiva, is the individual because it has only knowledge of its own subtle body. So the Taijasa, the Jiva, so it identifies with a certain subtle body and then makes it its home and say, okay, this is home to me. I like this subtle body. I like these vasanas, you understand? And I'm going to make it my home. So, okay, this is me, this is my home. Okay? So I am defined by this. I'm identified with this subtle body. It's going to have a certain understanding of one's body-mind complex, but the Jiva, usually, it does not even understand its own body-mind construct, I mean, the Jiva has not knowledge of its own subtle body. I mean, before we come to Vedanta, we don't even know that we have a subtle body, so to speak, So the Jiva simply identifies with the subtle body, and then later on identifies with the physical body because it wants to experience matter again. It wants to experience samsara again. It identifies with it, okay? And it knows very little about this body-mind complex, this instrument of knowledge, you see? So it knows very little about it. It knows very little about Jagat, the laws of Jagat, the ethic and dharmic laws. He knows nothing. You understand? The only thing that the Jiva knows is what, Dave? He knows that he wants what he wants. I came here, moved. I was born out of my vasana. I have this huge vasana to experience energy, matter. You understand? And I know what I want here, and I'm gonna go for it. So that is the avidya, man. That's what the Jiva knows, and there is not much knowledge in that. You understand? The knowledge comes when we develop enough sattva that somehow is going to gradually brings us to these scriptures, Vedantic scriptures on knowledge, on pure knowledge, the knowledge of reality, the knowledge of existence, consciousness. And then the Jiva begins to understand a little bit of Mithya, and then a little bit of Satya as well. Otherwise, the Jiva does not do anything. But definitely, Jiva is totally identified with the medium. It's totally identified with the mind, with the reflecting medium, although it does not know that there is a reflecting medium producing, this reflected consciousness that becomes the ego, you understand? And has its likes and dislikes operating and so on. So the Jiva, it just has a little bit of knowledge, a lot of ignorance. The only thing he knows or she knows is that he wants what he wants, the way he wants, and when it wants, and it works hard to try to accomplish one's desires and fears. Dave, I'm not seeing you very happy today, David. I'm a little bit concerned. Elizabeth, have a good chat. Have a good chat with David later on. Reduce him up.
Well, I'm just thinking that got a couple questions for Thursday. Let's put it that way.
That's wonderful. So the verse 25th, Ishvara sees all subtle bodies as itself. The jhasas are only identified with themselves. They see difference. That's a beautiful. That is a more to the point statement. Ishvara, although it does not have sense organs to see, hear, or anything, but Ishvara, Ishvara is the manifestation of the universe in its integrity. So we say that Ishvara is the intelligent, efficient cause. It is the energetic cause. It's the raw material cause, okay, Thomas? And then it becomes the manifest universe. When we look into the universe down to any inert object, like this wood here and whatever, we need to see the Ishvara playing, into everything. So this is the wisdom, the view, the eyes of Vedic wisdom that sees Ishvara manifesting in everything. So Ishvara sees all sorts of bodies as itself. The Jiva, when the Jiva becomes wise, due to this merit, spiritual merit to come to these scriptures, and then develop spiritual wisdom, and then the Jiva sees Ishvara in all subtle bodies. That will be a more accurate. The Jiva, a wise Jiva, Okay, we'll see Ishvara in all subtle bodies. We'll see Ishvara in all inert matter. Understand? So Ishvara, so to speak, sees everything as his own body, the macrocosm body of Ishvara. So this is a nice statement. Ishvara is also, yeah, present in the entire universe, the manifestation of the entire universe, which involves the intelligent cause, the energetic cause, the material cause, to bring about the universe manifest as we hear, as we know. Okay, but the jivas, they are only identified with what? The jiva that I don't. I mean, it's my physical body. Yeah, and I don't want it to go. I don't mind if my neighbors, it comes to to their expiration date, but I don't want my physical body to go. So it's so identified with their own body, mind. You understand? And they see difference. They'll say, "Oh no, there is a key. What is this talk about eternal, universal Jiva? No, I mean, I am a unique Jiva, and I have never met such a beautiful Jiva as myself. Because of what? Because, I mean, I see myself in the mirror and I look at it, and no matter how old I'm becoming, I love myself the most because, I find myself beautiful, unique. Have you met these people who talks about the uniqueness of every jiva and how godlike the jiva is for being a unique creation? Things like that. So this is the jiva. This is the Taijasa. It's identified with themselves. They're fascinated with the body-mind construct, and they see difference everywhere. Difference, different jivas, different names and form. They can never see through the different names and form and see Ishvara as the substratum of Mithya. You understand? The substratum of Mithya fundamentally is Satya, okay? Pervading. But Ishvara is there as the Sattva that creates, sustains, and recycles everything in Mithya. That is the eye of wisdom, as we say. I don't know. Huh?
So, Alindo, once you have assimilated the everything, eventually you can then only live in awareness. Isn't that the truth? Once you have assimilated that you're actually not a jiva,
Right.
but that you are always consciousness.
Yeah.
Eventually, if the fear of dying has left you, and you say, well, doesn't matter what, I'm ready, but I also like the world as it is. I'm enjoying everything. But eventually, can you not let that go and just live only in the awareness if it is really has assimilated, if you have assimilated everything?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So once this knowledge is clearly assimilated, there is a sort of a shift of identity. So one identifies with one's primary nature or primary identity as consciousness, because I know that fundamentally everything is consciousness and I cannot exclude myself from that. So I am consciousness and I live from that platform as consciousness, means to say, I live, I experience, I interact with the world through the reflecting medium and through the reflection, which is the intellect. But I clearly, this discrimination was properly done and established in a way that although the world changed, the intellect changed, everything's changed, I remain unchanging in my primary nature. So that's what I understand you say. I live in consciousness, means to say, in spite of Mithya, I live in Mithya, but from the platform of knowledge, of certainty, that I am limitless consciousness and I'm not bound by time.
So you are actually only doing us a favor because you know who you are. And so you would like, you giving us this knowledge and you're trying to, you're trying to give it to us by
Well,
teaching.
yeah, I mean, this knowledge, it was given to us by consciousness via Ishvara, okay? And then
Yes.
we had what we call this extremely sattvic contemplative minds that received this knowledge and unanimously,
Unanimously.
Anonymously,
Yeah.
no, yeah. Now, all of them together, unanimously. How you say it again, David? Una?
Yeah.
Unanimous?
It's anonymous.
No,
anonymous.
Anonymous.
no. When everybody agrees on the same thing, there is a
That's a unanimous.
Unanimous.
yeah, unanimously. All the rishis agree that this knowledge did not come from them. Okay, that's why nobody signs on the Upanishad. There is no author. Okay, so this came direct from consciousness, and then what happens is this knowledge is made to be passed on. Okay, because I mean, when people come in contact with this knowledge, it's a turning point in one's life, you know. So it needs to be passed on, and it is better conveying to others when the individual who is sharing this knowledge was benefit by this knowledge. So if the individual is clearly self-realized, if he is sure about what he is as consciousness, you understand? And then this adds more value to this sharing, to these expositions, because it gives the people listening to this sharing, gives them confidence that this is something possible, because for most people it sounds like something crazy, you know. What is that? You are not your intellect, what you are not your mind, so you are consciousness and you never change, you are never born. So it gives people confidence that this knowledge is not a trip, it's not a something crazy, you know. It is a fact. These statements of the Upanishads, they are factual. So it's better that the expositor of this knowledge, the people passing it on, they have this self-knowledge, you understand? Because it comes out better. And I say that because even if people pass it on from the level of academic knowledge, still it has some value. But once the individual is properly familiarized with the scripture, with this body of knowledge, and if he is self-realized, if he knows, if his knowledge is clear, and then it makes him or her a better expositor or teacher, you know? Okay. Okay, I guess we're gonna have a good Q&A on Thursday, and Elizabeth has brought a good question as well that we could elaborate a little bit more. And we meet again next Thursday, Ishwara Willi. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, David. I hope, nice. I was going to say, I hope you're going to give me a smile. Now you gave me a smile. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, everyone. My friends, my dear friends, I love you, and we meet again this coming Thursday. Okay? Namaste.
Thanks, Alinda.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
God bless.